Hi, everyone. My name is Brendan Dolan, and I'm a medical student at the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health, working with Wisconsin Voices for Recovery to bring you Saturday Night Chat. Saturday Night Chat is a monthly chat that creates a space for people to share their recovery journey and to show people in and seeking recovery that they are not alone and that recovery is possible. Today, we'll be hearing from Megan. Megan, with that said, would you mind introducing yourself, your journey to recovery, and anything that folks who may be tuning in, you think they should know about what got you to where you are now?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Megan Reel. I am always happy to speak about these things because my life was it was altered because of the the disease that I have. My life has completely changed. So I love talking about addiction and I love talking about everything surrounding that. So I think there needs to be more advocacy surrounding that. But so I'm up in the Green Bay area. Currently I'm the operations manager at Manna for Life. We're like a nonprofit outreach center that helps with the essential needs, and we have a food pantry and all of that. I also do recovery coach work for Darjun up here. And those two things I really love doing because they tie into my recovery. So in those two roles, I'm able to work with other addicts quite a lot and bring different resources, because I think that there's a lot of things that we as other recovering addicts, we have to bring to the table and kind of come together and create those resources sometimes, whether that be from the small stuff to just having a place for somewhere for people to meet, or some type of, like, we have a drop-in center, so they're able to we just opened a drop-in center this year, so they're able to come and hang out and get snacks, drinks. We have an open computer, Wi-Fi, all of that, so they can job search. A lot of different recovery materials that they can read on, and we have a huge like resource center, so they're able to get basically all of their needs covered there. At least even if I can't personally give the resources to them, I can at least lead them to it. And so having myself well versed in what those resources are equips me, but also helps my recovery. And working in these types of environments, I don't think I would be able to do an active addiction. It takes a completely clear mind to be able to make decisions like on this level. So these things that I'm doing today are only possible because of my road to recovery and the other people in recovery as well that have helped got me here. Being of service and working with other addicts and all of that, it strengthens my recovery every single day. And yeah, I truly believe that if it weren't for that, I never would be able, because I always wanted to work in something like this, but it really took me getting my mind right and getting my skills and my coping mechanisms and how I'm able to interact with other people and how I'm able to handle situations. All of that goes out the window because for me, my addiction was, it was an issue of the mind. It all rooted with mental health. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds fantastic that you're able to draw so positively from your addiction history. And it seems like a lot of the success of your current role comes from personal experience. And to that point, would you mind sharing a little bit more about how long you've been in recovery and prior attempts that maybe weren't successful for one reason or another, and how you think learning from past attempts has been so beneficial to the work that you do now?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've been clean for almost 3 years. I'm a little over 2.5 years sober. It's the longest that I've ever had sober. Yeah, I was very much I was like the revolving door. I was in and out, in and out, Um, I was introduced to substances at a kind of young age. I know there's a lot of people that I've started, their addiction started, very young. For me, it took a little bit until I was like late teens to really get introduced to any substances, but it started off with, things that as a teenager I thought were normal because the people around me, the kids around me, that's what they were doing, drinking, smoking weed, prescription pills. That was like my biggest thing was prescription pills, because for me, I always struggled with this sense of I like a loss of like sense of identity. And I had a lot of issues with anxiety and depression and all of those things. So when I was introduced to something that can be so beneficial in so many cases, that can also lead to substance use disorder, I really, in my mind, I had no idea what addiction was. It was never really, I never had much experience with it. I was kind of shielded off from that, even if it was like in my immediate family. It still was something, well, we don't really talk about that. Or, even, and knowing me being on the side I am now, having gone through so many things, I'm aware that they probably didn't know themselves. I've learned that even in addiction, I don't have a rhyme or reason for why I did things or why I continued to choose substances. And because I wasn't well versed on how addiction works. And I I can't expect someone that's, quote unquote normal, that doesn't have addiction, to be well versed themselves, because especially back then, I mean, I like to say back then, but even just 10, 20, 10, 20 years ago, it was taboo to talk about in just general conversations. So yeah, for me, it started with prescription pills. That was my first thing, because in my mind, this is something that's going to help my condition. It helped with all the things I was dealing with, like I said, the anxiety, all of that, and especially opiates and benzo, whatever it was, stimulants. I really thought I found something that was going to finally help, but for me, I the moment that substance entered my body, I was it completely controlled my life and everything I chose to do from there on. But I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And so that kind of snowballed into this early 20s life of always taking it a step too far. I was always going out and partying. I was huge into, like, especially in Wisconsin, the drinking culture here. And I, compared to all my other friends, I would always take it a step too far. I never knew when to stop with whatever substance it was, honestly. But then I finally got to the point with everything, that my life was completely, I kind of saw this cycle happen and I could see it right in front of me, but I had no idea what to do about it. It was this cycle of, okay, I'm going to kind of get my stuff together. I'm handling things, I've got a job, I've got a place to live, I feel like I'm managing it. And then it would always fall apart. All my relationships would fall apart. I'd always lose my job, or I'd always lose the place I was living at. And this happened 3 times over the course of like five or so years, that it just kept getting worse and worse. But when I was in that, I kind of wanted to look outside for the problem. I was like, what is it? Is this the problem? Is this person the problem? Or is this circumstance the problem? Or is this like hand that life dealt me the problem? It's problem by circumstance. So it got to the point that I remember seeing addiction growing up and not really knowing much about it, but I knew I don't want to be like that. But next thing I know, I'm, 21, 22 years old. I have no place to go. I'm living out of my car. All family and friends have cut me off. And I was completely, it felt at the time, rock bottom. But for me, I just kept hitting rock bottom over and over again. And it wasn't until kind of forced into a situation where treatment, like a rehab, basically an inpatient treatment, was available to me, that I even started to consider it. And I didn't really even know that was an option. Like, I heard about rehab, like what that meant in movies, but I didn't know what that could look like for me. I didn't know what options I had even around me locally. The place I grew up in and lived my whole life, I had no idea what was around me. So I kind of, like I said, then as my addiction basically worsened, I fell into that cycle of going into the hospital, going to the ER, going inpatients. And, in my addict mind, I didn't really realize that there was something like I needed to treat, there, like I couldn't just like keep going, stop using the substances and then just go on my merry way. Like there was something that, underneath all of that that I had to treat. And it was, for me, it was very uncomfortable. So I just kind of fell into this comfortable cycle, where, okay, well, I know these consequences are going to catch up to me at some point, but I'm just going to keep going because I don't know what else to do. I don't know any other way to live. So yeah, it was this constant cycle of that and moving into and going into like sober living, which luckily I was able to discover was an option for me. That was I did that about 4 different times until I finally stayed clean and was clean for good, this past time. So it was a pretty lengthy, I mean, for me, it's like half my life. It was a pretty, I know there's a lot of people that, struggle with it for even longer, but for me, it's just, it was exhausting. It was an exhausting way to live because I had all these, hopes and dreams. I want to do this or that, but like I said in the beginning, none of that was possible with when my only goal, no matter if I wanted it to be or not, was addiction.
Yeah, and I think you touched on a number of really important, it sounds like very difficult to grasp with internal factors, but also external factors as well. You were mentioning just unfamiliarity with support resources, and it sounds like a sober living community or area where you could be around more supportive influences, whether that be friends, colleagues, or staff, was hugely important for you. I'm curious, did you more of maybe on both the internal and external factors ends? Did you ever have any challenges in the prior cycles that you had mentioned to or alluded to with stigma, maybe holding you back from what would be long-term success now to the effect of like 2+ years that you've had?
Yeah, I there was a lot of different instances. I think, stigma, it's a label, or it's like a label for a lot of different circumstances I was in. Like, stigma is a reason I really didn't know much about it growing up. And stigma was a reason that I, thought I, had such a negative view of myself because in my head, this is what I was taught, that addiction is just, someone you can clearly see they're high walking down the street, it's that person that's, I just had this like clear image in my mind of what an addict looked like, not knowing that it's, almost everybody that I know, like they have someone close to them, whether that be in their immediate family or a friend or whatever it may be, that have dealt with addiction. I've met so many people that you would never in a million years think they're addicts, and they struggle with it. And so for me, it was just such a this thing in my mind, and that's what stopped me from even pursuing not just treatment, but just talking about it, because I didn't, I kind of perceived it as being weak. I kind of perceived it as this is a bad thing, addiction equals I'm a bad person, and I had this, no matter what I today I can separate like the actions from the person when it comes to addiction, because I know for me, when I was under the influence, I didn't do things that were totally aligned with my true character. but when substances are in the way, I can't grow and learn as a person, especially when it gets in the way as like a developing, child and in the teen years. It can completely stop any development. And that was the case for me. So I was kind of navigating this where I didn't even want to talk about it because until it was like really right there in my face, and friends and family were like, I think you have a problem. Even then they didn't really want to even bring up that word. Like, maybe you should go to treatment. That was basically it. And I was like, well, what does that mean? And even they didn't know. So in my in those cycles, like I'd mentioned and you had referred to, there was a lot of instances where I would go to seek some type of help, because to me it was just, under under a state of like being under the influence, I would go to the ER. There was a few instances where I was told, I'm wasting their time. Nurses would get pretty, basically annoyed with me, because I mean, which I get, it's not never fun to deal with somebody who is like under the influence, but I also don't get it because it just is like, it's still a disease and it still needs treatment, and I'm coming into a place where I'm looking for treatment. Well, and I don't know where to even start, because it's really hard to start that process. Even now, knowing everything I do, it's still pretty hard. It's hard to get people started with that process. So I go to the first thing I know, go into the ER, and it's not treated as a disease. And so when I'm in there and I'm being, told, you're wasting a bed, you're wasting a room, or there's a nurse. I think that tough love can be a good thing sometimes. I think that, kind of having to face reality, and these are the, because it was really easy for me to kind of live in this delusion of like everything's going to be okay, just kind of separating it from my mind. So tough love did work for me in some cases where it was like, okay, I have to face the facts of my reality. But it was also like, I truly believe, if there was, and there was a few instances where some doctors and nurses, and I walked in there, where they say, I'm glad you're doing this, good job, like I commend you for doing this. I've heard that. So I've seen both sides of the coin, and it kind of just confused me, because it's just like, well, and even then it was like, talking to a medical professional, it still is hard to talk about addiction, because there's, well, you need to see an addiction specialist, or you need to see a behavioral specialist. And I understand that not everyone's going to be, um, they're not have gone through their training with those specific categories, but I believe that having that available when someone is going in to seek, in like in a crisis situation, like there's so many different avenues I tried going down, when things were really tough, like calling the crisis line. And like I said before, it's never fun to deal with somebody who's under the influence. But I faced a lot of people that were just kind of like annoyed with the situation, because it's like I wasn't ready to hear it, or I was just really over emotional, or I was just like, I was at, and this is kind of what drugs did to me, is it kind of made me get to that point where I felt like the world was ending, and um, another part was especially was finding a place to go to or detoxing, and going through withdrawal is probably one of the worst things I've ever been through. It's really, it's very difficult, because there's some that can, the physical symptoms can last a week, maybe even more. The mental effects can last so long. So for me, it was like trying to find somewhere to go to seek, okay, I'm going to be given the proper vitamins and this and that. It was very difficult, especially where I live. There was very few options, to the point where I had to tell the person on, like the medical person on staff, I'm in a mental health crisis, basically, just to seek treatment, because there was no specific place to go for opiate withdrawal, any of that. And I was very fortunate enough to meet someone in the the inpatient treatment I went to, Willow Creek, I believe I went to, and I was very lucky, fortunate enough to meet a therapist who went out of his way to find me a spot in the inpatient center, Jackie Nitschke Center. And there's not a lot of people that are, there's some that are going to do that, but there's some that aren't. So there's so many experiences I had that I was like, okay, if I do this, it's going to be this way. So if I go into one of these places and I'm not treated seriously, like not taken seriously, that in my head, like in the future, I feel like that's how it's always going to be, when honestly there's so many different types of people in that field that see it in completely different ways. But yeah, and when it comes to like medication and all of that, even just speaking with like a doctor that knows a bit about my history, I kind of got stamped with an addict on my record, basically pretty young, I think by like 18, 19, even when I wasn't self-proclaiming being an addict. So it was almost like going into to see help with some type of issue that usually required a controlled substance. It was like the doctor didn't want to bring it up, and I didn't want to bring it up because I don't want to look like a drug seeker, like I'm doctor shopping, however they call it. And so it was kind of like this tense situation where it's like, well, I need to be, or I feel like I need to be treated for this, but um, the doctors, because they saw, in my opinion, it felt like because they saw that on my record, it was like they were very hesitant to even talk about. There's a few instances where I was withheld specific medications because they didn't want to jumpstart my addiction or whatever it may be.
Um, and so maybe a last closing thoughts here to bring things full circle. You've mentioned a number of um, really excellent resources that it sounds like have helped you get to where you are today. Finding, again, supportive, sober living community, a great therapist, an opportunity to get treatment at an inpatient detox and rehabilitation center where withdrawal symptoms could be safely managed. Um, what do you think is and maybe this relates to your current job, what do you think are some of the most realistic solutions, whether they are at like local healthcare, maybe at like the state level, or even at like federal policy levels, would be most beneficial to put yourself in your shoes a number of years ago that you think would have gotten you into your sustained recovery faster, that you think would be equally helpful for folks that may be trying to get to the success that you're having now?
I think that there's so many different things, and I think that more things are going to be revealed to us as years pass. There's going to be people with, good ideas that are going to start rolling them out. And uh, I think that one of the things is more government involvement with treatments and sober livings, because there's some that's just, it's unregulated right now. So there's just not a lot of involvement with that. I mean, it takes just people with like a good heart to start that, and to start it correctly. And so if there was a little bit more involvement and a little bit more, funding to open up, not just county treatment centers, which it might not have the correct professionals there to help, but an increase in general of mental health professionals would be, and not just that, but the access to that being made a lot easier. Because I know for me, just to get into see it like a therapist or a counselor, even now it takes several months to do that, because the need is so high. So more involvement with creating more roles for that, I feel like would make a lot a world of difference. And starting at a young age, teaching that in schools, that this is a huge problem, especially with the fentanyl epidemic right now. This is becoming something like we can't continue to ignore. We need to get it out in the open, and we need to talk about it. We need to talk about it, at where it's age appropriate, but where it's going to start affecting them, because there's I've seen middle schoolers, high schoolers getting involved with this, and it's sad. It's crazy because when I was that young, I know there's people that have different experiences, but for that hard of a drug to be around then at that age, it's just awful. So like a little bit more, and not just the stay away from drugs, but bringing someone who's a substance abuse professional in to really talk about. And like I just spoke for a school, but like for I think a freshman year health class, and bringing addicts in who can share their own stories and experiences, because I don't think anything hits harder than like a real life experience, because we can roll out all the facts and numbers, but it takes, so I believe sometimes it takes really getting inside the mind of not just an addict, but an addict who has found a way to cope and figure out a lifestyle and process that works for them. For me, that was the 12-step program, and really devoting my life to the lifestyle that lays out. And I know that's the case for many others, but there's so many different types of treatment options, and making that more available, and bringing up, like I said, bringing up the conversation and making people aware, putting it out everywhere you go, like going into the hospital, here's a whole list of resources, that not just resources, but a list of options. There's medication assisted treatment, there's, like I said, the sober living. Those are things that sometimes you kind of have to dig for, and especially as a recovery coach now, um, I have to sometimes dig for those resources and find out where they're at, and making that more like apparent. Here's the thing, here's what's available to you, and here's the different paths you can go down. What would you want to try? And especially bringing, like I said before, not all doctors and nurses are going to be in the addiction field. They have, other specialties. So having recovery coaches in, and substance abuse counselors on hand, like when someone does go into the emergency room up here, they immediately call one of us if it has anything to do with addiction. So they have, and I when I got clean, that wasn't available for me. So I think that's an amazing option, and it really should be available everywhere, because not only am I someone that can help you get there, but I've gone through it, and I can show you what I did, and having someone that understands, but really breaking down the stigma that it's not, addiction is not a choice, it's a disease. I didn't choose to have this disease, but I can choose to do something about it. I have to make that choice every day to treat it. But it wasn't until I could truly understand how it as a disease like affects the brain, and how it actually is defined as a medical disease, like, and why that is, um, having that information and knowledge about what I guess my disease, my illness is crucial. Because when I'm walking around, it's like, imagine someone with diabetes walking around not knowing how diabetes works. It's like, I think it's crucial for like basic general knowledge, to be available, and for everyone to be just aware of how it actually works, so they can know how to handle themselves if the time comes where they have to question, am I an addict or not? Because that is a big thing to sit down and think about, and be like, okay, is this, because this is, for me, like I said, it's life changing. I wouldn't change it for the world, because I think it's given me so many different skill sets and different things I can do in my life now that I truly 100% enjoy. But it can show people how to deal with a loved one or a family member that's an addict, because there's so many different types of reactions to it, of tough, like I said, the tough love, cutting them off, enabling. There's so many different tactics, and it's like you have no idea how to deal with it, how to navigate it. So yeah, just knowing exactly what, okay, you're telling me you're an addict, I know what you're going through. Even if I'm an addict or not, I can understand at least generally how this disease works, and see it as that, as someone who's, I don't have to judge them by the choices they make, because the priority in their mind is drugs and only drugs. But see, give them a chance when they get clean to really show their true character.
Well, thank you, Megan, so much. You have an incredible story. Congrats again on your tremendous accomplishment. And I wish you nothing but continued success in the future. Thanks for sharing your story and especially obstacles and solutions for you and potential solutions for the community at large with Wisconsin Voices for Recovery. Any last words?
No, I thank you so much for having me on. I could talk all day about this, so I really appreciate the opportunity to continue to share. And hopefully, I really love what you guys are doing over there, giving everyone a voice to speak, and just to keep talking about it, which is truly awesome. So thank you.
Thank you.